And we also have with us tonight Jeff Dowdy. Now, Jeff Dowdy, if you've been listening to our show, has been on our show several times. He's a prominent criminal defense attorney here in Central Florida. He's handled a lot of high-profile cases. He's certified to handle death penalty cases, and he's helping us try to understand this George Zimmerman case. And Jeff Dowdy, welcome to our show tonight.
Thank you very much, Chris.
And you've brought a special guest with you who happens to be a client of yours, so if you would.
Yes, I have. I brought Robert Zimmerman here tonight. He is George Zimmerman's brother, and he's been gracious enough to join us on tonight's show.
Absolutely. Thank you, Robert, for being with us tonight.
Thanks for the invitation.
Oh, we really appreciate it. And, if you'll just get right up sort of close to that microphone there. Robert Zimmerman, I first want to say that I am proud of the fact that we were, it may have been the only media outlet at the time. I know we were right there on the front edge, and I was called everything from nuts to Bull Connor to other things, but right from the start, we saw that there was more to this than what the media was telling us, that your brother basically was getting railroaded.
Right.
That people were making much more out of this. They were trying to make it into something that it wasn't. And I'm so proud of this show because at that time we had just started our daytime show, which is from 5 to 6 p.m. in the afternoons. We had just started it, and when we first heard about what had happened, we were a little reluctant to talk about it because we didn't really know what was going on. And unfortunately, not enough other people did the same thing.
Right.
And
they jumped to conclusions.
We had a lot of vigorous debate about what could have happened, but we stopped because this is all conjecture. We're not going to base a whole show around what we think might have happened. We weren't there. And it seems like MSNBC thinks they were there. Al Sharpton thinks he was there.
And
they weren't there.
That sort of goes to the point of what I'm trying to say here, and that is that the media tried to make this into their version of events.
Correct.
Not the actual version of events.
Right. I think the media really defined journalistic incompetence because they took the word for people who have a now proven financial interest in shaping the outcome of this narrative as fact, and they just repeated it as fact, and those would be the lawyers for Trayvon Martin's family. They weren't there either, but they also appear to, from their statements, have an interest in how the public perceives this case, and unfortunately a simple act of self-defense, while unfortunate, has now been twisted into some kind of civil rights case, which this is not the case for that.
And in the process, part of the process was depicting the two main people involved in this, your brother and Trayvon Martin, in totally unrealistic caricatures.
Correct.
As it turns out. What we found out in the evidence presentation by Mark O'Mara is the characterization of Trayvon Martin certainly was not, shall we say, accurate. And I dare say the same thing for your brother. And, well, by God, we're going to start to make it accurate tonight.
Okay.
Okay? First of all, are you his older or younger brother?
Older brother.
You're his older brother.
Correct.
Do you have any other brothers or sisters?
I have a younger sister and an older sister.
Okay. Were you all raised in the same household?
The oldest sister was not raised in our household. She's a child of our dad's previous marriage, but all three of us were raised in the same household.
I had the same situation. I have a half-sister who's much older than I because of my father's situation. Let me ask you this. What was it like growing up with George?
I think I can sum that up best by saying when the media was looking for us, they found our neighbors, and the neighbors referred to us as the boys. I think we were kind of like a pair, a unit, people. We did everything together. We were altar service together. We went to the same schools. We did the same activities, the same church activities, and people around town would confuse one for the other all the time. So it was nice to have a brother, also nice to have a friend in my brother.
So you guys had a good relationship growing up?
Absolutely.
Not like myself and my brother. We fought like cats and dogs. we die for each other today, but back in the day, we literally drove my dad nuts. Did growing up make George, how should I say, a racist?
Absolutely not. No, I think back to that original point that you were making about certain key words that kind of spun the story out of control. I think 3 of those words were white, black, and gated community. And we are not white. We'll never be white. We're Hispanics. We're Americans, more importantly. And we grew up in a community where we elected, for example, the first black sheriff of our county. We grew up in the age of Governor Wilder, the first black governor of Virginia, and had many community leaders that served their community honorably that we looked up to, who were African American or white or anything. But we were a product of an interracial love story, so we didn't look at everyone around us who was white exactly the same way as our family. We spoke a different language at home. Most people did not. We ate different foods at home. Most people did not. So we knew that we were different, but we just accepted that as just two different ways of doing things and made a cultural distinction as opposed to a racial distinction growing up.
Carl.
Yeah, I'd like to ask you...
Up on the mic, please.
I'd like to ask you specifically, isn't there black heritage in your family?
Yes, there is on our mother's side.
Okay,
Absolutely.
would you just here? Okay, let me just say this, because this case has gotten me so frustrated via a couple in our church that I spoke about off air. They know your brother, and your brother actually helped them out,
right,
as a result of their apartment or townhome being broken into right before the Trayvon Martin case, as a matter of fact. So they knew your brother as someone that was helping out in the community, that wasn't a racist, that was there to help people. It frustrates me. You mentioned three words that you say kind of shaped the case. I want to throw in another two. Big Perm, a.k.a. Al Sharpton.
Right. Okay.
And this frustrates me as a black Christian conservative, because I feel like racism exists because there's race baiters like Al Sharpton that will use cases like your brother's and pull another Tawana Brawley.
Mm-hmm. Right.
And this is very frustrating. But you actually have black ancestry in your family.
We actually have relatives that look very much like you. In Peru, they have green eyes. A lot of black people have green eyes, or even blue eyes in Peru, and some of our relatives look like that. But
I thought you meant because he doesn't have any hair.
I thought he was gonna say, "Praise God, you got a handsome family." But
I was going to say that next. I'm sorry.
But no, go ahead.
No, I think obviously some of our frustration in the beginning came from hearing people such as Mr. Sharpton and others who were not there reporting things that they would have no way of knowing. For example, Jesse Jackson saying Trayvon Martin was shot in the back of the head, and in self-defense, and we know better than that. Or Al Sharpton repeating that George was told not to get out of his truck. I mean, that's just not based in fact. There's a recording of that call. But I think we have we're very sensitive with race in this country because it is our country's original sin. It was manifested with slavery, and I think sometimes when people throw out racial accusations, we have to be sensitive with them, but we have to address that sometimes what people are actually doing is they're reacting emotionally to something that they hear. The problem comes in people distinguishing that what they're hearing may or may not actually be true, and that the people who say those things in our society today, they're not held accountable. Mr. Sharpton will never have to retract himself. Jesse Jackson will never have to say I was wrong, no matter what the verdict is. And the standard has devolved into proclaiming someone a racist and then demanding that they prove that they are not. Where when you make accusations, traditionally you should have some kind of foundation for saying, I believe that this person is whatever because I have observed the following. Not just simply because the person he defended himself from was African American. That doesn't make you a racist.
And I would add to that the fact that I think this kind of stuff destroys our justice system. I mean, when you're tried in the media, before you even get to a courtroom, before you know the facts, first off, let me say, this is just my opinion, and I feel horribly, I really do, for the Martin family. I hate that their son died, but I look at that situation that evening as a horrible tragedy. I'm a concealed weapons carrier myself, so I was speaking to you during the break, and I was saying something that I think needs to be heard. I look at this situation as a horrible tragedy, perhaps two people coming together thinking they were something that neither one necessarily were at the time, and it ended up being a horrible tragedy. But a tragedy is what it is. I hear the testimony may or may not be coming in regarding the screaming and the yelling. But I look at that situation, and to me, in my mind, and forgive me for just using common sense, but I'm thinking the person that was on the bottom is probably going to be screaming. And also, as a concealed weapons carrier, I have to say this. Your brother, if he carried a gun, as we know he did carry a gun, was trained just like any other concealed weapons carrier that if you're in need of help, you yell out.
Right.
Not because you want to hurt somebody, but because your instinct. See, people have this idea of us concealed weapons carrier that we just want to kill people. Mm-hmm. It's so far from the truth. We want to defend people. If there's a situation where we can help out or if we can defend ourselves, we want to defend. And he did what they tell concealed weapons carriers to do, right?
Right.
They tell them, yell out so that you can get someone's attention so it doesn't have to come to a life and death situation.
Right. Well, there's a couple of things there that you're bringing up. You're bringing up kind of that George became the fall guy, number one, for guns. I really noticed at the beginning that people who don't understand the requirements or the regulations or how people who carry concealed weapons are trained don't understand why George had a gun. And there's a lot of symbolism to a gun. A gun is a very dangerous thing, just like there are to other words as well. I think that when you have a conversation about guns in this country, you're really having 50 different conversations because every state governs how people carry guns uniquely, you know. And as far as the screams that you brought up before that is before the court, whether the screams will be admitted, whether expert testimony would be admitted. I think it is absurd to even suggest, based on what we now know, there may have been a time when just some call is released, you know, that people could say, well, what if it was Mr. Martin screaming? It's absurd after seeing how George was pummeled, after seeing the blood running down his head, after confirming with medical records that his nose is broken, medical records that the state did not ask for before they arrested him, that Mr. O'Mara brought up in court that they had not asked for, and he had to provide for them at a bond hearing. I think it's really absurd to even be questioning, would someone like that be screaming? I think it's fairly consistent with the rest of the evidence, with the witness who saw MMA-style blows, and with George saying himself to police, I screamed and screamed, but nobody would come to help me. I think that when you have something to hide, you kind of, you know, retract yourself, don't talk about stuff. I think he was very forthcoming, not just that night, but cooperated with police always. And I don't think he would have made that statement. I know he wouldn't have made that statement if it weren't true.
By the way, folks, if you want to see some of the photographs, two of the most revealing photographs that have yet been released, and here it is, the eve of the trial, and we finally see some photographs that depict and let's just say prove what George Zimmerman was saying that night. Just look in the Orlando Sentinel today. It's on pages, here, listen to me, I'll turn to them. Pages A13, 12 and 13 in the Orlando Sentinel. On page A13, you will see a man who has blood all over the front of his face and all over the back of his head. And that man is not Trayvon Martin, it's George Zimmerman. Okay? And I guarantee you that Trayvon Martin didn't do it after he had a bullet in his chest. All right? So, yeah, to think that the man who was getting the snot beat out of him, excuse me for saying that, Robert, would not have been the one screaming for help is just beyond belief. But that's unfortunately indicative of, I think, what has gone on in this whole case. Jeff Dowdy, I want to ask you a question. And I kind of got this idea from somebody else who we also know, who was a former prosecutor. And I believe Jed said on your show yesterday, there are other pressures that sometimes come to bear on the prosecutor beyond the evidence. And I think we've kind of touched around the base of this here with the Jesse Jackson stuff. Do you think that were it not for the political pressure that this trial would be happening, and is that necessarily good or bad?
Well, it's bad. I mean, it's purely political at this point. I mean, the Sanford Police Department made a determination that George was not going to be arrested, and politics started playing a role in it, and that's how it transpired. And now we have a prosecutor that's involved from not even in Seminole County, from up in Jacksonville, and now she's facing political pressures up there from her employees and former employees. It's turned into a political mess.
Indeed it has. And when that happens, isn't it much more difficult to get a fair trial for anybody?
it's going to be awfully difficult to find for a fair trial.
And this is something that I've been talking about. Jeff, give us a couple more minutes in this segment, please. Yes. This is something that I've been talking about from day one, and that is it does not do us good to carry out an injustice against George Zimmerman in the cause of trying to make something right that we perceive to have been injustice carried out to Trayvon Martin. Okay?
Right.
Let's just presume for a moment that there was an injustice carried out against Trayvon Martin. Does two wrongs make a right? And I'm not saying it did. I don't think that Trayvon Martin was treated unjustly that night. He made decisions that put him in the situation that he found himself in. He made decisions. This is the same thing I said the first day. He made decisions. It was a two-people dance. I mean, it wasn't just a one person. It wasn't all George.
Right.
Trayvon Martin made decisions that put himself in that predicament.
I think to your point that you brought up with Mr. Dowdy, I think what is unfortunate here is that the public is not going to be able to trust the people who are supposed to protect them if they are not given a consistent message the entire time that an investigation is carried out. And they were consistently told by the police, Chief Bill Lee at the time, that there was no probable cause to charge George with any crime. The prosecutor, who's now since retired, and his office did not charge George with any crime. I think Mr. Lee, the former chief, or any police officer in that department would have loved to have found one shred, one inkling of evidence, anything that could tie George to murder, and they would have charged him with it because people were calling for it. Unfortunately, what happened, as Mr. Dowdy said, is that politics became a factor. And that is what will destroy in the end, unfortunately, the trust of the people of Sanford. They deserve to hear a consistent message. No crime was committed here. In this country, we do not charge people with crimes to assuage the misguided concerns of the masses. We have something here called probable cause, and we have magistrates or prosecutors, and that's how we charge, with informations that are founded in fact, not just for political reasons.
When we get back from the break, I'm going to have to ask you where you got your education.
Thank you.
Because you know what you're talking about.
Yeah.
Yes, he does.
Before we go to the break, thank you, Jeff. Let's go to a caller. Avner, thank you for calling. And your comments, please.
If I would like to suggest a packing heat campaign for all those like me who don't want to carry a gun because I never want to kill anyone. And that heat could be pepper spray. And I was just thinking maybe lives could have been saved.
Unfortunately, in a case like this, I think that the pepper spray would have ended up in the wrong hands and being used on the wrong person. I understand that your sentiment there, but I think that it's rather impractical, to be honest with you.
The other comment, I was really kind of shuddering. I think it was last week's weekend edition Wall Street Journal. I think it was the back cover of the first section. I think it was an ad placed by the government housing department showing a black child and saying, have you been discriminated against for, I guess, a mortgage because of your skin color? And to me, to have an ad like that placed by the government, I mean, how is that helping our country?
Well, you're absolutely right, Abner, to point that out. It's not helping. Just like what's going on down here is not helping the situation at all. As a matter of fact, now we basically have a tinderbox up there in Sanford, don't we, Jeff?
Yes, we do. And I'm very concerned about Sanford and Seminole County. You just don't know what's going on.
Thank you very much for what you do.
Thank you, Avner, for being out there. We appreciate your call. Robert, when we come back from the break, I do want to talk to you a little bit more about your family.
Okay.
Once again, folks, we're speaking tonight with Jeff Dowdy and Robert Zimmerman. And Robert is the older brother of George Zimmerman. Once again, we appreciate you being out there. If you'd like to call and participate in the conversation, 407-774-8255 is the number. Real quickly, before we go to the break, when was the last time you spoke with George?
I do not comment on things like that because his trial begins tomorrow, and I just don't make any statements about him, nothing that could be interpreted the wrong way. If I said yesterday, people would interpret that one way. If I said a year ago, people would interpret that another way.
Sure, understood. And certainly, Jeff, you're here, and he's your client, so
That's
if we
correct.
stray anywhere we shouldn't go, you'll let us know.
No, that's fine. We just have security reasons.
Okay, all right, and I want to talk about those as well when we come back from the break. Once again, folks, you're listening to the American Adversaries, a very special edition tonight, along with Christopher Hart, Nostradamus, Carl Jackson. We have Pasquale Barba, Jeff Dowdy, and Robert Zimmerman in the studio, and we'll all see one of the six of us. There you go. Folks, welcome back. That's right, you are listening to the American Adversaries. This will be a short segment because we extended the first segment, but in the next half hour, Jeff Dowdy and Robert Zimmerman will still be with us here in the studio, and later on, of course, we're going to have our Who Said That contest, and we have another guest coming up after the top of the hour as well, so once again, stay with us. Robert, how are your parents? Robert, are you junior?
Yes, I am.
Okay, how's your father doing and your mother?
Health-wise, not so good. Dad had a heart attack. He was released from the hospital just days before this incident and told to rest and to recover. And after his procedure, and he never really got to rest and to recover. Our mom has had health concerns, some of them pretty serious in the last month. I think that we feel that George is in good hands with his defense team, but this is our family member, and this is not about winning or losing a case. It's about keeping our family member with us in our family. So we have a lot of faith in Mark. We're encouraged by his approach. He has a secret weapon. Mark O'Mara, right? Don West as well. But this is very serious. The ramifications of this are very serious, and we foresee acquittal, if not the prosecution doing the right thing now and withdrawing an improper charge that they should never have filed to begin with. But it doesn't mean that acquittal is going to be able to restore our way of life, and it's not going to resonate immediately with people who have been misinformed and are guided by their emotion.
Once again, folks, we're trying to show that there's two sides to this tragedy. We've heard all about the hardship that this has caused Trayvon's parents, and certainly it has. It's got to be the worst thing to lose a child in any fashion whatsoever. But the other side is just as true. People are suffering on the other end of this thing too. So you can't forget that. We'll be right back after this break.
Hello, you're listening to the American Adversaries live this Sunday evening. I'm Carl Jackson, sitting in studio with Christopher Hart, Nostradamus, Pasquale, attorney Jeff Dowdy, and we have Robert Zimmerman in, as well as Tyler Israel, Johnny Guns, Jeff Sinnis, so we got a full house. But we were interviewing, or we're continuing with Robert Zimmerman in studio here. And Robert, during the break, like I said, I am so frustrated with this case. I follow it religiously because I hate injustice. Mm-hmm. I hate grief. I hate to see what the Martin family is going through. I hate to see what your family is going through. But let me say, in no disrespect, this case goes beyond your family.
Right.
It goes beyond the Martin family.
Right.
This goes towards justice.
Mm-hmm.
And see, there's people out there, and I'm speaking, I'll be blunt, I'm speaking as a black man who can't stand the Democrat Party because of the lies that they've told black Americans about the history of slavery. And I see race baiters like Jesse Jackson, and I see race baiters like Al Sharpton, and it makes me mad because what they do is destroy the justice system for everybody.
Right, right.
And so it's frustrating to me to see your brother in a position where justice is being distorted, not just for him.
Right, yeah.
For everyone.
Right. It is particularly alarming. I think the law was defiled in a very egregious way this time because self-defense statute exists so that when you are forced to defend yourself, your life is not messed up. Or, once that law is supposed to protect you, protecting your life. It's there so that your life doesn't get screwed up by society or political pressures or anything else. It's supposed to protect you. That law was defiled. If you defend yourself and you're prosecuted anyway, what will happen with the next George Zimmerman? And also it's made the standard that if we simply interject race in anything that's fairly straightforward, we have to have some kind of questioning of very straightforward facts to satisfy a particular race. And justice really should be colorblind, and it shouldn't be about satisfying interests of a particular race or a particular group. It should be about satisfying the interest of justice in our society generally.
That's why Lady Justice is depicted with a blindfold, right, Jeff?
Exactly right. I couldn't say it better. That's right.
Not only colorblind, but wealth blind and any other discriminatory factor blind, so to speak.
Correct. Absolutely correct.
And how's this been for you?
Wow, that's a good question. How has this been for me? I think...
because on the one hand, and let me just elaborate.
Sure.
On the one hand, here's your brother, okay, and obviously you guys are pretty close.
Mm-hmm.
And then on the other hand, you have this whole false depiction of him going on.
Okay. Right.
There's the two elements, if you will, of it.
Sure.
First of all, it's your brother, your flesh and blood, who's involved in this terrible tragedy, and that I'm sure must cause you stress.
Sure.
But then there's the whole thing of the false accusations.
Right.
And I'm not just talking about him being accused of the crime. I'm talking about being called a racist and all this stuff that the media propagated and guys like what Carl's talking about.
Right. I think I stepped in because of what Carl was talking about. March 26, I was told by FDLE that my house was not safe. My brother called me. He wished me a happy birthday. He told me that the police would call me. They did. March 29th, I went on the air for exactly what Carl was saying. It wasn't so much that it was George and self-defense or the gun. It was that race had now been interjected. And we really need to, when race is interjected in straightforward things that are tragic as they are, we don't need to amplify the tragedy by taking a step backwards in how far we've come in the past 50 years in equality in all senses of the word. And I was particularly concerned that this could happen to anybody. Anybody could defend themselves, and race would be interjected. Any race, not just black. It could be anything. And then suddenly you have this spin-off narrative that's going uncontested and unrebutted by people who, purport to be journalists, but they're just accepting as fact whatever these attorneys are saying with a now proven financial interest in the outcome of that narrative.
And that obviously is an injustice in and of itself. All right, we have a couple of callers on the line. I want to go to them, and please be brief and straight to the point. Eva, thank you for calling tonight. We appreciate you being out there. Your comment, please.
Yes, I want you to use this case as much as possible against the media. And the reason being, I have Comcast because, to me, it's coming out of the White House. And I want to know everything going on because I don't trust none of them.
Well, that's a good point, and certainly the media is making it easy for us in this case.
MSNBC proved they're not trustworthy by the way they edited those police.
The NBC network, yeah. Go ahead.
There was a show on today. I think it was on either BET or Discover Network, one or the other, I don't know. And it had this case, how we stick together with Trayvon. That's wrong. This was around 12 or 1 o'clock. I do not, like I said, it was either Discovery or the History Channel.
Yeah, thank you, Eva. I appreciate you pointing that out to us.
Somebody needs to make the media and the attorneys stand up for it. The attorneys have got us in this mess.
Well, okay. Thank you, Eva. We appreciate that. Jeff Dowdy, I think what she's saying here is that people like Ben Crump and others are taking advantage of this situation, and I'd call it unethical.
Well, this is, as Robert was saying, this is not a civil rights trial. It's about self-defense and stand your ground, and the media has made it, and Mr. Crump has made it into a civil rights issue, and that's when Robert pointed out back in March that he wanted to step forward because when he learned of that, his brother's just been wrongly characterized. It's wrong. It's wrong.
It is wrong, and it's not going to bring, guess what, folks? It's not going to bring Trayvon back. It's not going to do a thing for Trayvon. It's not even going to do a thing for his parents. This is a miscarriage of justice when we falsely accuse someone of something.
And Chris, it's not going to do anything to eliminate racism. I mean, let's face it.
No.
I watch
it's
racists.
Making it worse.
Yeah, I watch racists on MSNBC all the time. I mean, the fact of the matter is, if you can't mention anything, if you can't talk civilly, if you can't talk law without bringing up race when there obviously is no case for race, you're a racist. I mean, Al Sharpton, he's a racist. I've heard Jesse Jackson say blacks can't be racist because we have no institutional power. Moron. You don't get to judge what racism is. God judges the man's heart, not a race. Not a race of people. And unfortunately, it's frustrating because I see my race just literally using cases not like this, but not perpetuating racism where racism doesn't exist. And the end result is that they perpetuate racism.
That's right.
There are groups, I believe, that have a vested interest in perpetuating racism. They don't want to become obsolete. And one of those groups that I believe has a very vested interest in people having, and it's unfortunate because young people grow up like this and they perceive it, but people having a perception that blacks have no institutional power. For example, like you said, is the NAACP. I remember when I wrote a piece for the Daily Caller about meeting Ben Jealous, the president of the NAACP, and I remember when he was in Sanford, he was saying things that were just out of line with reality. For example, the police did nothing to investigate. There wasn't even an investigation. They didn't take his clothes. Well, they did take his clothes, and we have the photographs of them now, and we have the evidence that was collected from those clothes. And we know that George was in the police department, arguably arrested, and then released because he passed his voice stress test and his story made sense. But no one dares hold the NAACP's president's feet to the fire and say you are fabricating and you need to retract your words and you're doing a greater disservice to advancement of equality. You're inciting racial hatred with reckless disregard for the safety of the public.
Let me ask you this. Carl mentioned God. Is George a man of faith?
Yes, very much so.
And that's, I presume, what's helping get him through this.
Very much so. Yes, absolutely.
Were you kids? What'd you say you were called? The brothers?
The boys.
The boys.
Everybody in Manassas called them the boys. The boys.
Were you boys raised that way?
Yes, absolutely.
You said they were altar service together.
Yeah. We served in a Catholic church's altar service for almost 8 years, give or take.
Okay. All right, we've got a couple more callers. Rick, once again, please be brief and straight to the point. Thanks for your call tonight.
Hey, guys. The media on this has just been absolutely horrendous from the get-go. Black-on-black crime doesn't get reported. Black on Hispanic crime or Hispanic on black crime doesn't get reported. They went after this because, oh my goodness, a white man, because his name was Zimmerman, on a black child. You remember the pictures that came out? They were his 8th grade pictures.
Yep.
That's right. They made him look like Urkel.
Yeah. We talked.
And it came out as this big media hype, and they went after Mr. Zimmerman from the get-go.
Yeah, they tried to make him.
It was white on black crime.
Yeah,
well, they created the new race, white Hispanic.
That's right.
They basically took this story and did what they wanted to do with it.
Right, and unfortunately, the media people tend to have this perception that the media is informing, that the media is telling us the truth. Some people, wiser people, know better, but what the media is actually doing, they're pretending to inform, but their agenda is to craft a narrative and to shape public opinion to support that narrative. That leads to emotional reactions and responses that are not founded in fact. And it's very hard to argue with someone who feels very strongly. People ask me all the time, how do you feel about people who say X, Y, or Z? Well, they believe that they're informed. They believe that they've heard the truth. They probably saw on NBC someone who said, there's this guy here, he's suspicious, he's black. And so I might feel like them if that's how I were informed. That's the unfortunate thing, is that the people that are deceived don't even know how badly they're deceived yet, but they will.
It's kind of like Reagan said, liberals, it's not that liberals don't know anything, it's just that most of what they know is wrong.
Right.
This is something I say all the time. Wrong information leads to wrong conclusions. And another aspect of this, I feel like people out there need to understand, those of you that are for for Trayvon Martin and Zimmerman going to prison and all this kind of stuff, you need to understand what a disservice you're doing to the memory of Trayvon Martin. Because here's the fact. Here's what's going to happen. If you destroy George Zimmerman's character, you're by default going to have to destroy, or the attorneys are going to have to, Mark O'Mara is going to have to destroy Trayvon's character. The guy is dead. I'm sorry that he's dead. Horrible tragedy. But now, see what you're doing in your haste for justice. That is no justice, by the way. You're destroying Trayvon's character. Let him rest in peace.
Yeah. What you said about the media, though, we use professional wrestling to explain politics around here.
Okay.
And we're dead serious about it. Okay. I know it's in the entertainment industry, but it's a great tool to explain politics.
So is politics.
Yes, exactly. Very much so. And unfortunately, that's what's bled into this trial. And that's what concerns me the most. And it's been from the very start, which is why from the very start, we've been saying, look, carrying out an injustice against George Zimmerman is not going to make anything right in the world.
Right, agreed.
Right?
Sure.
And the media, the role that they play is like the announcers on professional wrestling. They have their scripted storyline.
Right.
And they're going to stick to that no matter what. And we see it in all kinds of, national politics. But we're seeing it here as well. The media came up with a scripted storyline, and they're sticking to it no matter what.
And if facts come out that don't go with that storyline, they have two things they can do. Either ignore them or edit them to make them fit.
Yeah, absolutely. Rick, thank you for calling out there. I want to go to Diane now. Diane, thank you for calling.
Hey, guys, this is an awesome show, as usual.
Thank you.
I just want to offer up total sympathy for Mr. Zimmerman's family, and we have prayers all around the country for you and your family.
Thank you so much, and we've relied not only on prayers, but there's been this outpouring of people who have supported us in so many different ways. It would be impossible to name. They have sheltered us in their homes, in their couch, in their basement, helped us out to get transportation, doctors, nurses, hospitals we may have been in, people who are really professional and take their oath seriously and who've protected our privacy and may have ended up having a hand in protecting our safety. So thank you for the prayers. We certainly see the effect of that.
Oh, that's a total God thing. Thank you so much.
Thanks for calling.
Thank you, Diane. We appreciate you being in our audience. Carl,
I'd like to ask Jeff Dowdy, or I'd like you to respond to this. I'm looking at Mark O'Mara, and I think he is a genius as an attorney, because it seems to me that not only is he controlling the situation in the courtroom, but he's controlling what could be a situation outside of the courtroom. Could you speak to that?
Mark,
Do you know what I'm saying?
I have known Mark for nearly 25 years, and I've always looked up to him. He's been my mentor, and Mark is a fabulous attorney, and so is Don West. And I think you've seen in the last 3 days what Don West can do. Benjamin Crump got out there and said, why are they challenging this voice expert analysis? It's ridiculous. And those are the words that he used in our press release. This is ridiculous if they challenge. Now, we've heard witnesses testify, and Benjamin Crump is absolutely incorrect. Their methodologies is ridiculous. As one of the experts said, you couldn't even get the first base on it. That's sort of the misinformation, and that's the sort of thing that these attorneys, outstanding attorneys, Mark O'Mara and Don West, they're going to be fantastic in trial, and I hope they get the acquittal that they so much deserve.
Okay, folks, we'll be right back after this short break. Welcome back, folks. That's right. You are listening to the American Adversaries. Christopher Hart here, along with Nostradamus, Carl Jackson, Pasquale Barba. We also have in the studio with us Jeff Dowdy, who's going to be our specialist on the Zimmerman case right from the beginning to the end. And we also have in the studio with us tonight Robert Zimmerman, George Zimmerman's brother. Once again, welcome back, fellas. We appreciate you being here with us. And Robert, our mics are your mics. Okay? Anytime you want to come back on the show, anytime there's anything that you need to get out into the public, please feel free to come on our show. My mic's drifting away from me.
Sorry, that's my fault.
I want to do our Who Said That contest tonight because I picked out a quote that I think kind of applies. And if I were to say something to George, for one, I'm praying for you, George, and two, I believe in you, and three, it would be something along these lines here. Folks, you know how we play our Who Said That contest. I read the quote, or we read the quote. You simply call us up and tell us who said it. You'll win a $20 gift card to Cafe Positano. Thank you, Pasquale Barba. And we'll also throw in, this week, we have another copy of How the U.S. Won the War in Iraq by Duncan Hunter. The last copy of that we have to give away. And by the way, it is autographed. So if you know who said this, please give us a call at 407-774-8255. And I quote, "These are times in which a genius would wish to live. It is not in the still calm of life or in the repose of a Pacific station that great characters are formed. Great necessities call out great virtues." If you know who said that, give us a call at 407-774-8255. Great necessities call out great virtues. Something I'd like to say about George Zimmerman, Robert, and that is that, and I think this goes back to your upbringing, I think that the man has handled himself with great dignity.
I think so, too.
I look into a man's face, and that's the first place I look to judge a person's character. A lot of it has to do with the lines on your face and stuff as you get older, like us guys here. And I don't see the lines of a man with malice in George.
No.
I see the lines of a man who is a caring neighbor, a good brother, a good husband. Would be a good father. Is he a father?
No, not yet, not to my knowledge. No.
Hopefully he will have children, because he looks to me to be a man who's at peace with God. Am I wrong?
No, I think you're onto something, and I think that what inspires me is that George would have been doing the same thing in this situation if the shoe were on the other foot and I were being politically persecuted. George would have been my number one advocate, and George is the one who's actually charged with the crime. He's the one who actually got arrested. He's the one who actually spent time in jail. I haven't. So as hard as we've had and as surreal a reality we've been living for a year and 4 months now, George has had it worse than all of us.
Oh, I definitely believe so. Dennis?
Yeah, they call me the great prognosticator around here, but I'm going to ask you a question. So your brother gets acquitted, which I thoroughly believe is going to happen. I mean, if you look at the evidence that we know, there's no other outcome but that. What does he do with the rest of his life?
That I don't even know how to begin to answer that question.
Like the Duke lacrosse player said, where do I go to get my reputation back?
Nowhere, and that's unfortunately, courts have a lot of power, but they do not have the power to restore your reputation. They should be respected. The outcome should be respected, but the reality is that because race was made such a factor here, George will foreseeably not be able to just walk the streets a free man. In essence, in some sense, a prisoner in this country, in hiding in seclusion, and have to kind of rebuild some kind of meaningful way to engage with friends, family, public, etc. I don't know what our family's going to do the day that he is acquitted, because he will be acquitted, but what are we just going to get on a plane and pull out our ID, or how is that going to work?
And you're talking about the streets anywhere. Could be anywhere. Here, could be Los Angeles, could be the middle of Wyoming.
I know one place he'll be welcome. That's right here in the American Adversaries studio.
Sure.
And I mean that sincerely.
Thank you.
You understand?
I do.
Let me put this to you, though, and it's a little twist on what he's saying. Let's presume for a moment that there is some guilt found by this jury. Mm-hmm. Is George Zimmerman prepared?
I want Jeff to pick up on this, but what my concern is, I feel very strongly, and Mark O'Mara has suggested this publicly, the state knows they have a very, very, very weak, if any, case at all. I contend that the state should withdraw an improper charge. They know they have no case at all. In Florida, the burden is not just to prove what happened is a murder, but it's a twofold burden. You have to prove to the jury that it was not an act of self-defense. My concern is jurors, under this extraordinary amount of pressure, and there's no indication as the order stands now that they'll be sequestered. Certainly the veneer or the pool is not sequestered. They're to be anonymous, but I don't know what kind of anonymity is preserved within with a pool that is not sequestered that everybody can just look at. I think those jurors are going to be under a lot of pressure, and I'm worried about the lesser included offenses. I'm worried that the jury might think that, well, this isn't a murder, but maybe it's a homicide. Maybe it's a negligent homicide. And I think, Jeff, those are the two lesser included.
Jeff?
Right. That's a great point, because here's from the beginning, when Sanford Police was considering charges, they were considering manslaughter.
Right.
Okay. Now, when Angela Corey's office was ultimately appointed, they went on top of that and went for second-degree murder. And what you're drawing to is that the jurors are going to feel pressure. They're going to feel pressure every day going into that courthouse. And a lot of times in these type of cases, not this big, huge, but a jury will compromise. And if they overcharge the person with second-degree murder, the problem is going to be they might come back with manslaughter.
Right, and if I can add to that, the problem is also, let's say you get a jury summons, and you report for jury duty. Well, there's going to be some job that you don't report to for weeks and weeks. There's going to be some church that you don't go to for weeks and weeks. There's going to be some dog that doesn't get walked, and people are going to start to notice and put two and two together. And these jurors are going to have, I believe, I'm not a juror, but they're going to have fear of their identities being revealed, because you don't live in a vacuum. You live in a community that notices that you're gone, that misses you. So I don't know what kind of pressure they might feel.
Absolutely, Robert. And Seminole County is not a huge county. It's heavily populated, but nevertheless, you're right. The neighbors are going to know. The media ultimately is going to know. And they're not going to. Their names are going to be known, and they are going to be under extreme pressure to do something.
Right.
What I'm concerned with here is that George is being railroaded. Be quite, put it in layman's terms.
Well, you might put it up there. That's what it is.
And it would seem to me that the state would be a little bit more concerned with the security around this case. Not just with the jurors, but with the participants in the case as well. I mean, having them have to walk through this gauntlet of reporters and bystanders, and what I'm sure is going to be very early on protesters as well, on a daily basis, I just do not think that in any way represents good justice.
Well, that's going to be the problem, and I was speaking with Robert earlier about it, and you too. Wherever they take this case throughout the state of Florida, you're going to see the same scenario. I mean, this case is big enough. Wherever you go in the state of Florida, you're going to see it. The biggest concern is starting tomorrow morning when you have the jurors coming in, and they're going to see it. And it's going to start out strong. You're going to see protesters, whoever, it's going to be out there, and they're going to come in under immediate pressure. And then once the trial starts, it might wear down, but after that, there's still going to be ultimate pressure. It's going to be very difficult.
It's going to be very difficult. Real quickly, I know you guys got to go. Real quickly, where's the case about the Voice stand right now?
Right now, Judge Nelson, there was one witness left. I believe it was for the defense that got hung up in Rome at an airport, so they weren't unable to testify. Personally, I thought there was enough evidence for the judge to make a decision, but she didn't.
Okay. Well, we're going to have to go to break.
So we'll hear tomorrow morning.
We'll be right back.
Make a decision.
Okay.